Amen. Despite the diss, LJ.
No, it's not this.
I want to congratulate you on your son moving out of the house. That's
2 down, 1 to go, baby.
that is fantastic. I remember when our last youngest kid moved out, and like I was counting the days, but I knew my wife would probably have a tougher time with that. So I knew she would struggle, and I was kind of trying to baby step around that a little bit. And but I remember like 2 days in, I thought it was going to take her months to get over her, little baby angel leaving the house. And like I think it was like a day and a half into it, she turns to me and she goes, "It's so quiet." I was like, "Heck yeah, girl!" And it was good ever since. I thought it was going to be a much longer transition period. So anyway, LJ, congratulations. Appreciate everybody being here this morning. Want to, as we head into training camp, you're gonna have to, Stephen, I think, bring me down a little bit because we're feeding back. All right, how's that? You can hear me and we're not whistling? Awesome, perfect. Essentially, next week is training camp. I know by the hands that I saw earlier, there's a lot of guys going. There's a lot of guys that are staying. And what I wanted to do when Bobby said, "Hey, I need you to step in on the 6th to teach coming into training camp," I wanted to kind of prep guys for heading out to training camp. Picked out some passages that we're going to be going through. Now we're going to cover 11 chapters of the Bible today in the next 40 minutes or so. So we're going to move quick because that's a lot of chapters to cover. But essentially what we're going to do is we're going to get the Cliff's Notes version of that. And what I wanted to share with you is a little story on the Cliff Notes here. Hold on, I got to grab I'm not used to having control here. I forgot my iPad, or Bobby Bandera's iPad. And I know it's Bobby Bandera's iPad because I know the code. And basically, if you're a 49ers fan, you know the code too. When we talk about what I want to talk with y'all about this morning is meeting God on the mountain. A lot of us are heading up the mountain. Some of us are not, but I want to talk through some of that. And we're going to be covering a lot of ground. We're going to be doing the Cliff's Notes, but I wanted to tell a Cliff's Notes story to kind of kick us off a little bit as we wait for the caffeine to kick in and everybody to counteract the donut sugar rush that we get. I was a sophomore in college in, I think it was English 151 class. And we had to read a book and do a big paper on it and everything. It was, classic literature. And we had a list of books that we had to choose from. I chose The Catcher in the Rye because a lot of people talk about the book. Did somebody groan? Okay. And so everybody talked like it was a good book and all this stuff. And I'm like, I'm going to read that, having no idea what it was about. And so what I'm going to do is tell you a little bit about the book itself. It sucks. So, Stephen, yeah, it's 400 pages of really nothing. I mean, it really, really sucks. So I was stuck. I actually did the work. I read the book, got absolutely nothing out of it. It was terrible. And I'm like, my paper's due tomorrow because, of course, I'm a college kid. And I can't even BS my way through this because this book sucks so bad. So I go to the college bookstore and I'm like, this is like pre-internet, 1991. I didn't even know what an internet was. And so I go to the college bookstore and I get the Cliff's Notes. And they're like, because that'll kind of give you an overview of the book. I need something I need to write my way through so I can pass this class since I failed it the first time last year. But that's a different story. This is about the time I was pouring oatmeal into my radiator, just so you guys have full context. So anyway, I'm in line at the school bookstore and I'm like, okay, great. They've got the Cliff Notes version here of Catcher in the Rye. I put it down so I can check out and pay for it at the college bookstore. Swear to God, and I turn, and you know who's right behind me? College professor of the course that I need to write this book for, or this report for. So, Grand Valley State University, 1991, that was part of my life right there. So, and I'm telling him, I swear I read it. I swear I read it. And he's like, okay, kid. Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. Anyway, that book sucks. We're going to talk about a book that does not suck, that being Exodus, a far better story. If you're going to spend your time reading a story, read this. But we're going to cover 11 chapters of this story today because it's going to be important to what we're going to be talking about. So to give you and guys an idea of where it is that we're going, this is what we're going to cover off on. Exodus chapters 24 through 34. And there's 8 really good lessons that we're going to cover in rapid fire style this morning as we go through. Let's set the stage here a little bit since we're going to start halfway through the book. You guys, I'm sure, are familiar with a lot of the story. Moses is born to Jewish mom, kind of gets picked up by Pharaoh's daughter, grows up in Pharaoh's court. You know the story. Starts to identify with the Israelites that are enslaved at that point. Let my people go, and he tells Pharaoh plagues, and finally Pharaoh's like, okay, you can go. Oh, wait, no, you can't. Okay, you can go. And then they go, and then he says, no, you can't. And so he chases them again, and there's the Red Sea, the parting, all of that stuff. So finally, the Israelites, these, 1 to 2 million people marching through the desert, they go through all of that stuff as they come out of Egypt. And they go through the parting of the Red Sea. And right after the Red Sea, God leads them to the base of Mount Sinai. And that's where we're going to pick the story up. So a couple things that we need to talk about as we go there. The first lesson that we're going to talk about today is heed the call. There's a lot of guys here registered for training camp. It's going to be great to see you guys. Right now, we're at the base of the mountain this week. It's going to be great to see you guys that make that trek up the mountain. Those that don't, though, and that can't make it, understand that all of this applies to you. And we'll cover more of that as we kind of continue through this. But I want to make sure that you all are preparing yourself adequately. First off comes the call that God gives Moses. He says here in 24, 1 through 3, the Lord says to Moses, come up to the Lord, bring these guys with you part way, but then I want you to come alone the rest of the way. We'll see where that kind of comes in. I want to make sure that we're going to go up as a group. And chances are you're going to carpool with some guys, and you're going to have a great time of fellowship. But I also want to make sure that you take time to go that extra step toward God where you can come alone. And if you're here, you can even sleep in on Saturday morning. It doesn't matter. Take some time to meet with God one-on-one, whether you're here in Phoenix on vacation or if you're up in Prescott with a lot of the guys that are here in this room and part of the group. So here's what's funny about this too that cracks me up is when you get into verse 3, I had to keep this in here because it makes me laugh. When Moses went and told the people that God's telling me to come up this mountain, everybody, what do y'all think? And all these people, the Israelites, they just came out of the parting of the Red Sea. They say, hey man, whatever the Lord says, that's what we're going to do. So if God says you go up that mountain, you go up that mountain. So keep that in mind, that's what the Israelites say. Whatever God says, yes, we're down with whatever God says. That's going to come back a little bit later, as a lot of you know that are familiar with this story. Second lesson that we can learn. First, heeding the call. Second is build your altar and be still. When we start looking at this verse, 24, 4 through 5, Moses wrote down all of the instructions that God had given him about coming up to the mountain to meet him. And then he built an altar. He built an altar and sacrificed to the Lord and did those sacrifices. A lot of you are making sacrifices to attend training camp. A lot of you will make sacrifices to spend time with the Lord, and you should. One of the things that's interesting here is it says he got up early in the morning. A lot of the things that we talk about here is, oh, I need to spend more time but I don't know where I'm going to spend time with God. I need to spend more time with God. If you got to get up early in the morning, make that sacrifice and get up early in the morning. Because is it really a sacrifice? When you consider how much more that you get back from the Lord, what you give, you get back in abundance. I'm sure there's a lot of guys that can testify to that in this room, including me. So understand, make those little sacrifices. It's one of the big lessons that we can learn here with this verse. Build the altar, make the sacrifice, and be still. A couple verses later, when Moses went up the mountain, God showed up. The cloud covered the mountain. And then it says that for 6 days, the mountain covered the mountain. But on the 7th day is when the God spoke to Moses and started to actually interact with him. A lot of times when I stand up here and a lot of the stuff that I teach and I try to impart on you all, it's either lessons that I learned the hard way or stuff that I need to hear myself. And this is one of the big ones that I need to hear myself is it really takes time to pause, be still, and wait for God. There's a lot of times that I think I'm meeting with God because I sit down for 5-10 minutes and it's rapid fire from my mouth and my brain all to God. Then I'm up and I'm going about my day. And not often enough do I sit, because sometimes God will wait those 6 days, those 6 minutes, heck, 6 seconds for our mouths and our minds to stop and slow down and be prepared to hear from him. So one of the big lessons that we can learn from Moses in these verses today is to stop, build that altar, make those sacrifices, and be still and wait for the Lord to start talking. So here's where we're going to make up a lot of ground when we start to get into lesson 3. If you listen, take that time to listen and hear. That's important. Not only do you need to, hear that there's something going on, but you actually need to listen and hear that. God has all of the answers already worked out. Half the time I go to the Lord, it's, what about this? What about that? What about this? We got this. I know you're going to be there, God. I know you're going to deliver. But what about that? What about that? Guys, he's already got the answer, and he's waiting to meet you at the solution. So what's interesting when you read through these chapters here, chapter 25 through 31, it is a list, gentlemen. When God finally gets Moses' attention, he says, here's how you're going to do offerings. Here's how you're going to build the ark. Here's how you're going to build the table. Here's how you're going to build lampstands, and go on down the list. Here's how you're going to do the sacrifices. Here's how the priestly garments are going to look. And it's really funny if you read it. I mean, I don't know if funny is the right word, but it's like, do the buckles this way on the outfits that the priests are going to wear. Do the buckles this way so they don't die. So I think that's pretty important. How'd you like to be Moses? Be like, oh man, I forgot that one little part. What was that fastener? What was that supposed to look like? But he got it right. That's good. But that's how detailed it gets when you read the account. God's got the solution down to the minutest detail for you. It's there. He's got the solution. Here's what's funny too, is when you get down to chapter 31, he's like, here's all the stuff that I laid out. Here's what I want you to do. Here's how I want you to do it. Oh, and by the way, I've already got the guys for you to do it. These two here, Bezalel and Oholiab, those are the craftsmen that are going to do all the stuff. And he just lays it right out for Moses. Moses just needed to pause and listen to that. And here's the deal, gentlemen, is sometimes we think God is super mysterious. And of course he is, because his ways are higher than our ways. And we can't always understand. But he never hides the ball. He's not going to lead you astray or confuse you He's always going to speak with you directly and tell you the way to go. I mean, think about Adam and Eve in the garden. He didn't say, here's the garden. One of these trees is going to screw you up. I'll let you figure it out. He said, here's the garden. Do anything you want, eat anything you want, but don't eat of this tree right here. Don't do that. God will tell you. He doesn't hide the ball. Think about, I know it was Joshua later on in the Exodus story, but Joshua tells, he's talking to the Israelites about the law, and he's talking about God's goodness. And he says, I set before you God's way. I give you life. This is life, God's way. And here's death. And he doesn't leave it there and say, hey guys, you got life and you got death. Which is it going to be? What he says is, here's life, God's way. Here's death. And then here's how dumb some people are, including me. He says, choose life. So he gives it's there. Gentlemen, when God speaks, when you seek the direction, it's an open book test. You just open up the word, the answer is there. If it's a test, if you're going through a test, it's an open book test. Number 4, I want to make sure we're making progress here. When you go up the mountain, when you seek God, anytime, and I'll put it in the context of training camp because training camp is coming up, we're going to go up there. We're going to have great time. We're going to have great fellowship. You're going to have time with God. You're going to hear from God. I've had the opportunity to virtually get to know Brian Martin, who's going to be our featured speaker up there. You guys are going to be so blessed. I cannot wait to get into more depth and hear more depth about what he's going to talk about. It's going to be great. And you're going to come back down off that mountain. But here's what I want you to be prepared for, gentlemen. You're going to come back down the mountain, and you're going to be fired up. The world is going to be here waiting for you. You may be changed, but guess what? Things down here are, a lot of it's going to be the same. And it's all going to be done in your reaction. And I want to read this to you because this is a really, really interesting segment of a passage in the Bible. When the people saw that Moses was so long in coming down from the mountain, they gathered around Aaron and said, come, make us gods that will go before us. We know this story, right? You know, Moses is gone. Remember the guy that they said, go, whatever God says, we're down with whatever God says. Okay, he's 40 days, and they're like, as for this fellow Moses, does anybody remember this guy? That's what cracks me up about that. There's so many little humorous things in the Bible that crack me up. I love this one. It's like, as for this fellow Moses, at first it was like, go do whatever. As for this fellow Moses who brought us out of Egypt, we don't know what's happened to him. It's been 40 days, so let's start making idols and start worshiping false gods. And Aaron says, seems reasonable. So let's all gather some gold and let's make a calf. And look, here, these are the gods that brought you up out of Egypt. So the world's going to be there waiting for you guys. Things are going to happen that you're not going to know about, and you're going to come down. You might come down to a mess. So Moses, he's a super holy guy, right? One of the big founding fathers of the faith. So he must have handled it well. So let's take a look at how he handled it. So he and Joshua are coming back down the mountain. Joshua at that point was his kind of his assistant and his aide. And Joshua's like, hey man, I hear people making a ruckus down there. Can you describe the ruckus? Well, that's the Breakfast Club shout out for another child of the 80s here. But it's not the sound of victory, and it's not the sound of defeat. It's the sound of singing that I hear. And when Moses approached the camp, the Bible says his anger burned. He came down, all of this stuff, all of this time that he spent with God, gone in a millisecond because his anger burned. Let's talk about Moses for a minute. There's a lot of, Paul talks about the thorn in the side and the thorn that he couldn't get rid of. I believe that everybody in the room, me included, We've got things that we really struggle with, and we have a difficult time overcoming, and it comes back to us. And sometimes it's like we shake our heads at ourselves. It's like we're trying to be more Christ-like. We're training to be more Christ-like. We're showing up at practice and we do something stupid. It's like, man, I thought I had that. Anger, I believe, was Moses' thorn. When you go back into the story, when he started to relate to the Israelites, he sees an Israelite being mistreated by an Egyptian. What does he do? He snaps the guy's neck and he kills the Egyptian. Here's a situation where he burns, where his anger takes over control. And what does he do? These tablets that God has just given him of the law, he throws them down and breaks them into pieces because he's mad. So I'm sure God was like, come on, man. So he throws the tablets down and he sees that they built this golden calf. So what does he do? He has them grind the golden calf into powder and makes them drink it. He's like, here's what you deserve. I'm going to take out a punishment on you. You grind this up and y'all drink it. And then it gets worse. There's more to the story. There's bloodshed. There's death that comes as a part of that, all because of his anger. Later on, Israelites are about to enter the promised land, and God gives Moses an instruction: speak to a rock and water will flow out. What does Moses do? He gets angry and he takes his rod and he smacks the rock. Water comes out, but he smacked again, anger coming back to haunt Moses. And as a result, he was unable to enter the promised land, because I believe that God, while he was a great man of God, continues to be a great man of God, there was some sensitive business that was going to happen. A lot of bloodshed, a lot of war, and God needed somebody that was going to obey to the T. And somebody going in with a hot head was not going to be the right guy. God knew that, and Moses was unable to enter the promised land because he had that thorn, that anger. What I would caution you all, again, as we come down the mountain, the world's going to be here. Be prepared for that. Don't be surprised. Keep carrying the blessing and that glory that you have as you come down the mountain. Keep carrying that with you. What's one of the ways that we can actually prepare for that? Later on in Exodus, they start talking about the tent of meeting. Moses used to take a tent, pitch it outside the camp some distance away, calling it the tent of meeting, where Moses would go and he would meet with the Lord. The pillar of cloud would come, Moses would stay cloud would come down and stay at the entrance, and the Lord spoke with Moses. And it says that the Lord would speak to Moses face to face as one speaks to a friend. Gentlemen, you need to be preparing, if you haven't already, a tent of meeting. No, I don't mean you go to Target or REI and you plop something up in your backyard where you can meet. Maybe, if that's what you want. But here's what I mean by a tent of meeting. You need to have a time and a place where you go every day to meet with the Lord. Again, I hear a lot. I've come to practice for a long time, and I'm here with you. And one of the common refrains that we hear is, I need to spend more time with the Lord. Or what can you do, as we're talking about discussion questions? I need to spend more time in the Word. I need to spend more time in the Word. Here's the deal, guys. You control that. You control it. What did it say earlier on? Moses got up early in the morning. Maybe it's getting up another 20 minutes earlier, another half hour earlier. Establish that tent of meeting, that time and a place where you know each day that you are going to go and you're going to meet with God. Here's the deal. Remember the old song, Cats in the Cradle and the Silver Spoon, Little Boy Blue and the Man in the Moon. It doesn't swing like that. Sorry, I didn't mean to sound like Frank Sinatra or something there. But you know the song? It's about the kid that wants to spend time with his dad. And the dad's like, I'm off working. I'm off doing that. I'm all doing that. And so I don't have time. But eventually I'll have time and we'll hang out. Here's the deal, guys. God is always waiting for you. It's not like cats in the cradle. He's there. All you have to do is pick the time and the place, and he's there waiting for you. So when you think of that song, it's not a biblical song. That's not how God is. So dedicated time, dedicated place. God's saying, even Jesus says, I stand at the door and I knock. Open the door, gentlemen. When we're at the tent of meeting, let's start having conversations like this, like Moses had with the Lord. We have to earnestly seek the Lord. Moses said to the Lord, you've been telling me, lead these people. Sometimes God will give us big things to do, things that we don't even feel prepared to do, that he'll put on our hearts and that he's prepared us for. But you've not let me know whom you will send with me. You've said, I know you by name. Moses, I know you by name. And I found favor with you. But Moses says to the Lord, if you're pleased with me, teach me your ways so I may know you and continue to find favor with you. When we seek the Lord, the ultimate goal of that is to get to know God and to begin to become imitators of God, to become like God. Teach me your ways, because I'm telling you, his ways are a heck of a lot better. Help me to do things, Lord, like you do things. Help me to understand. Our seventh of our 8 lessons to take from these 11 chapters. The first, or this 8th one, repeat as necessary. Remember those tablets? Guess what? Moses broke them. He's got to go back up the mountain. Repeat as necessary. Sometimes if we screw something up that God has us do, he'll have us do it over again. Here's what the Lord said to Moses. The first time Moses went up there and God said, hey, here's these tablets that I've written out. Take these down to the people. Moses busted them. Now Moses has to truck his butt back up the mountain. And God says to him, you chisel 2 tablets out of the stone. So chisel 2 stone tablets out of the first ones. He says he'll write on those, be ready in the morning, and come back on up to the mountain and present yourself there. So natural consequences, perhaps. You busted them. You carved two tablets out. We're still going to have the law, but there might be a little bit of a price to pay. Here's what happens then, though, when Moses goes up. Is when Moses came down from Mount Sinai with the 2 tablets of the covenant of the law in his hands, he was not aware that his face was radiant because he had spoken with the Lord. When Aaron and all the Israelites saw Moses and his face was radiant, they were afraid to come near him. Fellas, you're faced with a choice. We're going to go up the mountain, many of us. And even those that aren't going up the mountain, you've got a chance to build out that tent of meeting, meet with the Lord this weekend. You've got a choice. You can go up. You can have a great time with the guys. You can smoke cigars. Cigars are awesome. I'm not a cigar hater. I love a good cigar. But I'll tell you, if you go and you smoke a cigar and you come back and all you got is cigar breath, you wasted $200 in 2 days. Come back changed. You may not even know the change. You may not recognize the change. Like Moses had no idea that he was radiating God's glory. And when people saw him, they're like, whoa, something's different about you, Moses. Men, come back different. Do you hear me? Come back different. You're going to have the time up there to fellowship. You're going to have an opportunity to spend time alone with God. You're going to have time to hear some wonderful teaching. You're going to have some time to, I'd say, get out of the heat, but it was pretty cold this morning. Enjoy that. Spend that time with God and come back different. The first time Moses went, he reacted poorly. The second time, he did well. and he came back different. Some of the people that you come back and you see, they may not like the change that they see at first. Much like it says Aaron and these guys were afraid. No need to be afraid, but man, come back different. Come back better. So where I'd like to go from here is to say, if being a Christian were illegal, we've got a number of police officers and law enforcement officers, retired and otherwise, in the room. And if being a Christian were illegal, would there be enough evidence to convict you? If you had to face trial? Ask yourself that question. Could they build a case? Well, it seems they can build a case with just about anything these days, but that notwithstanding, could they build a case against you? And how strong would that case be? Could they add charges to it? Could they tack things onto it? You know, one of the pastors that I listen to, it kind of cracks me up. He says, he's like, man, if being a Christian was illegal, here's what I want to go down for. I want to go down for possession with intent to distribute. So men, come back from training camp ready to go. If you're staying here, get your tent of meeting set up. Use this weekend wisely, next weekend wisely. Meet with God, be different, become different, and keep that going. Establish that tent of meeting, establish that routine. Your Father is there waiting to spend time with you. Spend that time. Take these lessons that we went through quickly. There's a lot here to unpack. Learn from those lessons. And gentlemen, may you be convicted of possession with intent to distribute. Thanks so much.